Thank you very much, Mr. Toastmaster. It's my pleasure to be here in front of fellow Toastmasters and most welcome guests for today's presentation. I'd like to begin by telling you that I am a foodie in some respects. I really enjoy the sensation of eating diverse foods, trying new flavors. I eat all sorts of things. I try to avoid certain foods like a lot of French fries all the time, and I don't eat a lot of junk food. But I am open to eating any kind of food. Today I'd like to talk about diets, and I'm going to be speaking for 3 to 5 minutes about my thoughts about diets, and then I'd like to open it up for a 2 to 3 minute Q&A about diets, where we can just have a discussion, and it can be like a press conference about diets. So that's what it's in. For food, I've had experience with diets through the people that I know. I knew a guy named John, who was a very friendly person, and I met him at SFU. He was a little bit overweight, and one time I went to his house, and he was skinny. And I asked him, like, how did you do this? How did you lose weight? And he's like, well, I'm not eating any carbs. It's a low carb diet. And that really worked for him. After a few weeks of that, he had lost all his extra weight, and he looked really thin and looked really good, and he seemed really happy about that. So for him, that diet was successful, at least for that time. And I think he's able to, fortunately, keep that weight off, which is amazing. There was a study that analyzed the effects of diets on people and looked at their weight loss during the diet, and then what happened after they stopped the diet. And the study claims that people who go on diets will gain all the weight back after they stop the diet. After a few months, they'll gain their normal weight, and actually they showed sometimes people gained even more weight after they stopped the diet than they had before they started the diet to begin with. So there's a lot of conflicting opinions about diets. But one thing is for sure, diets are kind of like trendy in some cases. Certain diets go more popular than other diets. Have you heard of gluten-free? Mm-hmm. Gluten-free is like the current craze right now. There was a gluten-free festival in Vancouver at the convention center, and they expected maybe 500 people to come out. There was probably like 10,000 people who showed up for the gluten-free diet convention, and they had to turn people away. People were really upset because they waited in line all day and couldn't get in to try the gluten-free bread and crackers. Wow. So in that respect, gluten-free is one of those things that people believe in, that it is a beneficial diet because they hear on TV about the benefits of the diet. They hear people on talk shows talking about the gluten-free diets. But gluten-free diets are scientifically only necessary for people who have gluten allergies or celiac disease. Not necessarily everyone will get a health benefit from gluten-free, but companies making food know that if they make gluten-free products, it will sell like hotcakes, and they can charge a higher price for those products. So in my opinion, certain diets, such as a weight loss diet, where you are combining it with exercise, eating a balanced diet, not malnutrition, but having good nutrition, I think those are good ideas. But I think people should be aware of these diet trends and really trying to look at the evidence. Is this diet the right diet for me? Because you may not want to be a gluten-free diet if that's not going to help you in the end. If you just want to follow a trend, that's the problem with fashions and the problem with people. They get into these different mindsets. Even science and psychology and all sorts of things can move in these trends, and people believe certain things, and then a few years later, it's disproven and shown not to be very good. So I'd like you to now ask me a few questions about diets, and maybe I can help discuss that with you. So any questions about diets? Do you follow any particular diets? Yes, Steve.
So a couple of things. One, you've got to check out Geoff's videos on his restaurant reviews. They're really different. He doesn't show anybody's faces, but he shows a lot of food and people eating the food. And you hear the sounds. It's just really quite excellent. And I appreciate that. So for myself, one of the things that I do, and I try to eat, a good mixture of vegetables, not so much fruit, but vegetables and whatnot. I don't cut back too much on the fats and the butters. But I do fast regularly, either for 24 hours or I'll go for 3 days and only eat maybe one meal a day. And it's part of and I thought that was kind of odd at first because I didn't hear anybody else doing it. But then I started doing some research, and it seems like a popular thing, fasting, as part of a regular eating routine, just to cleanse out the system. So have you seen anything about that, and what are your thoughts around that?
It's interesting. I personally have tried fasting a few times, and I find it does feel good to clear everything out. And I don't actually know the research about fasting, but I did read something today that certain kinds of fasting for long periods are seen as possibly not beneficial because not only do you lose fat, but you may also lose muscles and important body tissues which you will need to rebuild. But I think fasting, I know some of my cousins also did fasting quite often, like one day a week they wouldn't eat anything, and it's also part of certain religious customs as well. So I think fasting is something that's not unnatural. People have been doing it for a long time. And anyone else has any opinions about fasting? It's probably
great for fat loss.
Great for fat loss.
Yeah.
I went to a massage with a massage therapist in Bride Street, and he told me that he was on a extremely low calorie diet. He was eating like 500 calories a day. So that's essentially starving yourself, and at that point your body will start eating away tissues that it needs to stay alive. It burns muscle, it burns fat, and all sorts of stuff happens. So when you reduce your body calorie intake below the basic level of your metabolism that you need to stay alive without any activity, then your body will start burning muscle, start burning tissue that you probably don't want to lose, but you also get rid of a lot of fat too. So yeah.
There was one I just saw earlier, and I had never heard of this before, and it sounds to be gaining traction, which concerns me a little bit. And it's in Arizona where there's a doctor that takes people through a 30-day water diet, where it's just water. And they talk about at the end of that experience that they've actually lost muscle.
It's called prison.
It's called prison. I've heard of such a thing. I'm just guessing. It's a thing, but that one, I think my concern when I hear about the diets is that because there's so much that's going on, it takes more and more to gain attention.
Yes.
And that 30-day diet definitely grabbed my attention. And then people succeeded. I mean, not succeeded, I mean, they actually got through it, which was surprising. So it almost seems like you say, it's a fad, but what's the big attention grabber? And sometimes it seems that and it's beyond just like being carb free, that you're actually potentially putting yourself at harm here.
I remember for water, if you eat too much water as well, you can get water poisoning. Yeah. And there was a radio station that did a contest.
Yes.
And who can drink the most water?
Yes.
The lady won a contest and then died.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Right? So that people, even something as healthy as water can be bad for you in an extreme quantity. It's amazing. So diets, it's very fascinating because we don't know that much about our bodies except through science and experiments and what we hear from others. So, because the mind isn't really aware of everything the body is doing, it's very interesting. And like you say about certain diets are popular because they're extreme. Those ones will people will pay attention, and then people will try those extreme diets. So potentially that is a concern for sure.
Yeah, well, I want to mention that I think most diets work. I think to be considered a diet, you pretty much have to eat less than your body needs. So if you do that, your body is going to lose weight anyway. And to the point that after people diet, they gain more weight, that's just because they don't change their lifestyle, right? I mean, if you've been eating to be 200 pounds and you just lose some weight for a bit and go back to that, where you're going to eat enough to go back to 200 pounds again. So in order to have that diet and stick to it, you just have to change your lifestyle and eat accordingly. And I've done it several times actually.
And that's a good point because I talk about, I can't eat this in front of my kids quite a bit, and they recognize that daddy's always on a diet, right? But I thought, you know what though, I'm not. This is sort of my regular eating pattern that I'm being consistent with. And so I asked my children, what do you think about diets? And do you think you'll diet when you get older? And I said, and she goes, well, you diet to lose weight. And I go, once you lose that weight, what do you do? I was just kind of curious about them in terms of, and so what I taught them was, it's not so much a diet, but you've changed your eating habit. So I think I'm going to be phrasing it that way, that I've changed my eating habit rather than that I'm a diet.
Very interesting. I like that. One final note is that people who wrote down a diary of what foods they ate were way more successful in their diets. And I know Alex does it. He keeps track of everything he eats, and that gives him the calorie count for the day, and he really knows where he is. And if without that feedback information, it's hard to know how you're doing. But that wraps up my speech. Thanks everyone for taking part in that. It was great.